The winter wind cut through Emma's thin dress. Like 1,000 tiny knives, she stood in the grand entrance hall of Ashworth Manor, her worn boots leaving wet marks on the marble floor. The servants had brought her here from the village, their faces blank and unreadable. Now she waited alone, shivering, while somewhere in this vast house the master decided her fate. She had heard the stories. Lord Julian Ashworth was a cruel man, cold as the winter itself. His wife had died 3 years ago, and since then he had become a recluse in his enormous estate. The villagers whispered about his temper, his impossible demands, his heart of ice. Emma's stepmother had sold her to him like livestock. "He needs a woman to warm his bed," her stepmother had said with a nasty smile. "You're 24 and unmarried. No one else wants you. At least this way you'll earn your keep." Emma wrapped her arms around herself. The grand hall was beautiful, with paintings on the walls and a chandelier that sparkled overhead. But it felt empty, cold. She heard footsteps on the stairs and looked up. A tall man descended toward her. He wore fine clothes, all in black. His face was handsome but hard, his jaw tight, his dark eyes empty of warmth. Lord Julian Ashworth looked like a man carved from stone. He stopped 3 steps from the bottom and studied her. His gaze moved over her shabby dress, her tangled hair, her bare hands red from cold. Emma felt shame burn in her chest. She knew what she looked like: plain, poor, unworthy of a place like this. Her stepmother had made sure she knew her faults every single day. "So you are the woman sent to me," Lord Ashworth said. His voice was deep and cold. How utterly disappointing. Emma's throat tightened. She had expected cruelty, but the casual disdain in his tone still hurt. She forced herself to curtsy, though her legs shook. "My lord," she whispered. "Speak up," he commanded. "I despise mumbling." "My lord," she said louder, lifting her chin. She would not cry. She had learned long ago that tears only made things worse. He came down the last steps and circled her slowly, like a buyer examining a horse at market. Emma stood still, her hands clenched at her sides. She felt his eyes on her back, her hair, her worn shoes. When he came around to face her again, his expression showed nothing but cold assessment. "You will do," he said finally. "My housekeeper will show you to your room. You will bathe and dress appropriately. Tonight you will join me for dinner, and when I retire to my chamber, you will come with me. These are not requests, they are commands. Do you understand?" Emma's heart hammered in her chest. She had known this was coming, but hearing it stated so bluntly made it real. She was trapped. She had no money, no family who cared for her, nowhere to go. Outside, snow was falling. If she ran, she would freeze before reaching the village. "I understand, my lord," she said quietly. "Good." He turned away from her without another word. "Mrs. Pemberton will see to you. Do not disappoint me further." He walked away, his boots echoing on the marble. Emma stood there, feeling small and worthless. A plump woman in a housekeeper's dress approached her, her face kind but cautious. "Come along, dear," Mrs. Pemberton said gently. "Let's get you warm and fed." Emma followed her up the grand staircase, down a long corridor lined with portraits of stern-faced ancestors. Mrs. Pemberton opened a door to a bedroom that was larger than the entire cottage where Emma had lived. A fire burned in the fireplace. Thick curtains covered the windows. The bed was enormous, with posts carved from dark wood and blankets that looked soft as clouds. "This is your room," Mrs. Pemberton said. "I've prepared a bath for you. There are dresses in the wardrobe. They belonged to the late Lady Ashworth. His lordship never got rid of them." She paused, her expression sad. He loved her very much. When she died, something in him died too. Emma looked around the beautiful room. It should have felt like luxury, but instead it felt like a gilded cage. What was she like? She asked. Mrs. Pemberton's face softened. She was sunshine itself. Always laughing, always kind. She could make his lordship smile with just a look. He was a different man when she was alive. The housekeeper shook her head. Now he's just bitter and angry. Grief can do terrible things to a person. Emma nodded slowly. She understood loss, though not like that. She had lost her father when she was young, and then her childhood when her father remarried. Her stepmother had 3 daughters of her own, all beautiful and spoiled. Emma became the servant in her own home, doing all the work while her stepsisters went to parties. When her stepmother heard Lord Ashworth needed a woman, she saw an opportunity to get rid of Emma and make some money at the same time. His lordship can be harsh, Mrs. Pemberton continued, but he's not violent. He'll expect obedience, but he won't hurt you. Not physically, anyway. She touched Emma's shoulder gently. Try to be patient with him, dear. Under all that ice, there's still a man in there somewhere. After Mrs. Pemberton left, Emma bathed in the copper tub near the fire. The hot water eased her cold, tired muscles. She washed her hair with soap that smelled like lavender. When she stepped out and dried herself, she felt almost human again. She opened the wardrobe and found rows of beautiful dresses. She chose a simple one in deep blue, with long sleeves and a high neck. It fit reasonably well, though Lady Ashworth had been slightly taller and fuller in figure. Emma looked at herself in the mirror. Clean and properly dressed, she looked better than she had in years, but she still saw her plain face, her ordinary brown hair, her too thin frame. No amount of fine clothing could make her beautiful. She had accepted that truth long ago. A maid came to fetch her for dinner. The girl was young, barely 16, with nervous eyes. "His lordship is waiting in the dining room, miss," she said. "He doesn't like to be kept waiting." Emma followed her downstairs to a dining room that could seat 30 people, but only 2 places were set, one at the head of the long table and one to the right. Lord Ashworth stood by the window looking out at the snow. He turned when she entered. For a moment, something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, maybe, or recognition. But it vanished so quickly Emma thought she had imagined it. He gestured to the chair. "Sit," he said. Emma sat carefully, aware of his eyes on her. A servant brought soup, then roasted chicken, then vegetables and bread. The food was delicious, the best Emma had eaten in years, but her stomach was so tight with nervousness that she could barely swallow. Lord Ashworth ate in silence, never looking at her. Emma kept her eyes on her plate. The quiet was heavy, oppressive. She could hear the clock ticking on the mantel, the crackle of the fire, the clink of silver on china. Finally, when the plates were cleared and wine was poured, he spoke. "Tell me about yourself," he said. It was not a request. Emma's hand shook slightly as she set down her glass. "There is not much to tell, my lord. My father died when I was 12. My stepmother raised me. I have 3 stepsisters. I helped manage the household." She did not mention that managing the household meant doing all the cooking, cleaning and mending while being treated like a servant. "And why are you here?" he asked. His tone was flat, emotionless. Emma hesitated. The truth was humiliating, but lying to him seemed dangerous. "My stepmother made an arrangement with your steward," she said quietly. "She received payment. I received transportation here." "She sold you," he said bluntly. Emma flinched. "Yes, my lord." He was quiet for a long moment. Then he stood, draining his wine glass. "It's late," he said. "Come with me." Emma's heart began to pound. This was the moment she had been dreading. She stood on shaking legs and followed him from the dining room. They climbed the stairs to the second floor. He led her to a large door at the end of the corridor and opened it. His bedroom was enormous. A fire burned low in the fireplace. The bed was massive, with dark curtains that could be drawn closed. Emma stood just inside the door, her hands clasped together so tightly her fingers hurt. Lord Ashworth closed the door behind them. He shrugged out of his coat and tossed it over a chair. Then he turned to look at her. In the firelight his face looked different. Younger, sadder. For a moment Emma saw past the cruel lord to the grieving man beneath. "My wife died in this room," he said suddenly. "She was ill for 3 months. I sat by her bed every night, watching her slip away. I begged her to stay. I promised her anything, everything, but death doesn't bargain." His jaw clenched. "For 3 years I have slept alone in this bed, and every night I feel her absence like a wound that won't heal." Emma stood very still, barely breathing. She had not expected this. Confession. Vulnerability. "Your stepmother's letter said you were docile and obedient," he continued, "that you would warm my bed and ask no questions, that you understood your place." He laughed, but it was a bitter sound. "I told myself I needed this, that I was tired of being alone, that it didn't matter who you were, as long as you were here." He moved closer to her. "But now you're standing in my wife's dress, in her room, and I realize I'm not the cruel monster I thought I had become." Emma's breath caught. She looked up at him, confused. "I cannot do this," he said quietly. "I brought you here out of loneliness and anger, but I will not use you like an object. I will not become that kind of man." Relief and confusion washed through Emma in equal measure. "What will you do with me, my lord?" she whispered. He ran a hand through his dark hair. "You will stay here," he said. "You will have your room, your meals, your comfort. In return, you will keep me company. Dine with me, walk with me, talk with me. Be a presence in this empty house. But I will not force you to my bed. Not tonight, not any night, unless you choose it willingly." He looked at her with those empty eyes. "Can you agree to that?" Emma's throat tightened with unexpected emotion. In all her life, no one had ever cared what she chose. Tears stung her eyes. "Yes, my lord," she managed to say. "I can agree to that." He nodded. "Good. Now go to your room and sleep. Tomorrow we'll discuss the arrangement properly." He turned away from her, toward the window. "Good night, Emma." She left quickly, before the tears could fall. Back in her room, she collapsed onto the soft bed and cried. Not from fear or sorrow, but from the strange, overwhelming feeling of having been shown unexpected mercy by a man she had thought would be her tormentor. In his room, Julian Ashworth stood by the window, watching snow fall on the dark gardens. He had seen the tears in Emma's eyes. He had seen her fear, her resignation, her surprise at his words. When she entered the dining room in Catherine's blue dress, for one heart-stopping moment he had thought his dead wife had returned. But of course she hadn't. This woman was different, quieter, sadder. She carried her own grief, her own burdens. He had meant every word he said. He could not use her that way. Whatever darkness had grown in him since Catherine's death, he was not so far gone that he could ignore the humanity in another person. Emma had been sold like property, brought here against her will. The least he could do was treat her with basic dignity. But now what? He had her here, in his house. He had paid for her, and yet he had no idea what to do with her. The loneliness that had driven him to this desperate arrangement still ached in his chest. His empty house still echoed with silence. But perhaps there was another way to fill it. Perhaps simple companionship, human presence would be enough. He would try, for both their sakes. The next morning, Emma woke to sunlight streaming through her windows. For a moment, she forgot where she was. Then memory returned, and with it, confusion. What happened now? Lord Ashworth had rejected her, in a sense. Did that mean she was free to leave? But leave to where? Her stepmother would not take her back without the money, and Emma had nowhere else to go. Mrs. Pemberton knocked and entered with a breakfast tray. "Good morning, dear," she said cheerfully. "His lordship requests your presence in the library after you've eaten." Emma ate the warm bread and jam, drank the hot tea, and dressed in another of Lady Catherine's gowns, this one in soft grey. She found her way to the library with help from a footman. Lord Ashworth stood by a tall window, reading a letter. He looked up when she entered. "Good morning," he said. His voice was less cold than yesterday, though still formal. "Please, sit." Emma sat in a chair near the fire. Lord Ashworth put down his letter and faced her. In the morning light, she could see him more clearly. He was younger than she had first thought. Perhaps 32 or 33. His face was handsome, but drawn, with shadows under his eyes that spoke of many sleepless nights. "I want to be clear about our situation," he began. "You were brought here under false pretenses. I will not send you back to a woman who would sell you. You may stay here as long as you wish. You will have a room, food, clothing, and a small allowance. In return, I ask only for your company. I'm tired of dining alone. I'm tired of walking these halls with no one to speak to. The servants are kind, but they're not companions. Do you understand?" Emma nodded slowly. "You want a friend, my lord." He smiled, but it was sad. "I suppose that's what I'm asking for, though I admit I'm not sure I remember how to be one." Emma felt something shift in her chest. This powerful, wealthy man was as lonely as she was, perhaps more so. She had been neglected and mistreated, but he had been loved deeply and then lost everything. "I will try to be your friend, my lord," she said softly. "Julian," he corrected. "When we're alone, call me Julian. All this my lord business makes me feel ancient." For the first time in recent memory, Emma felt a small smile touch her lips. "Then you must call me Emma." Over the following days, a strange routine developed. Emma took breakfast in her room, then joined Julian in the library or the morning room. They read together in comfortable silence, or talked about small things, books they had enjoyed, the weather, the estate. Julian was surprised to discover that Emma was well read despite her circumstances. She had taught herself from her father's old books, reading by candlelight after her chores were done. They took walks in the gardens when the weather permitted. The estate was beautiful, with snow-covered hedges and frozen fountains. Julian showed her the rose garden where Catherine had spent her summers. He spoke of his late wife without bitterness, sharing memories that made Emma understand how deeply he had loved her. She used to sing while she worked in the garden, Julian said one afternoon, his breath misting in the cold air. She had a terrible voice, completely off-key, but she didn't care. She sang anyway. He smiled at the memory. I would listen from my study window and laugh. Emma watched his face soften with remembrance. "She sounds wonderful," she said gently. She was. Julian looked at Emma. "I'm sorry, I must bore you with these stories." "No," Emma said quickly. "I like hearing about her. It helps me understand you better." Something flickered in Julian's eyes. "And do you understand me?" Emma considered the question carefully. "I think you're a man who loved greatly and lost everything. Now you're afraid to feel anything at all because feeling means risking that pain again." Julian stared at her. No one had seen through him so clearly, so quickly. "You're quite perceptive," he said quietly. I know something about protecting yourself, Emma replied. She looked down at her gloved hands. My stepmother told me every day that I was worthless, that I was ugly and stupid, and a burden. After a while, you build walls inside yourself. You stop hoping for kindness, because hoping hurts too much. Julian felt something crack in his chest. This woman understood. She knew what it meant to be wounded by life. But you're not worthless, he said. You're intelligent and kind. Your stepmother was wrong about you. Emma's eyes met his. And you're not the cruel monster you pretend to be, she said softly. You're just hurt. They stood there in the snowy garden, two damaged people seeing each other clearly for the first time. Something passed between them, a recognition, a understanding. Neither spoke of it, but both felt it. A small seed planted in frozen ground, waiting for the right moment to bloom. That evening at dinner, Julian was different. He asked Emma questions about her childhood, her dreams, the things she would do if she could choose anything. Emma found herself talking more freely than she ever had. She told him about loving to draw, though she had no proper materials. She told him about wanting to see the ocean someday. She told him about the small kindnesses that had kept her going, a neighbor who slipped her extra bread, a cat that slept by her window, the stars she could see from her attic room. Julian listened to everything. His dark eyes focused on her face. When she mentioned drawing, he made a mental note. When she spoke of the ocean, something shifted in his expression. And when she described her attic room cold and lonely, his jaw tightened with anger at the people who had treated her so poorly. You deserved better than that, he said when she finished. Emma shrugged. Life isn't fair, my lord. I learnt that early. Julian, he reminded her. And you're right, life isn't fair. But that doesn't mean we should accept cruelty as inevitable. He leaned forward slightly. You're here now, you're safe, and I give you my word, Emma. No one will treat you that way again. The intensity in his voice surprised her. Emma felt warmth spread through her chest. Thank you, she whispered. The next morning, Emma found a package on her breakfast tray. Inside were drawing pencils, charcoal sticks, and a leather-bound sketchbook with thick, cream-colored pages. A note in strong handwriting read, "For the artist who deserves proper tools, J." Emma's hands trembled as she touched the beautiful supplies. No one had ever given her a gift before. Not a real gift given simply to bring her joy. She clutched the sketchbook to her chest and felt tears slide down her cheeks. These were not tears of sadness. They were tears of something she barely recognized. Happiness, gratitude, the beginning of hope. She found Julian in his study, working through correspondence. He looked up when she knocked softly on the open door. "Emma," he said, setting down his pen. "Good morning." "Thank you," she said, holding up the sketchbook. "This is the kindest thing anyone has ever done for me." Julian's expression softened. "I'm glad you like it. I look forward to seeing what you create." Emma hesitated in the doorway. "Would you sit for me?" she asked suddenly. "I'd like to draw you if you're willing." Julian was surprised, but he nodded. "If you wish. Though I warn you, I'm not a particularly inspiring subject." "Let me be the judge of that," Emma said, with a small smile. She settled in a chair near the window where the light was good. Julian returned to his desk and his letters, trying to work while she sketched, but he found himself distracted by the soft scratch of her pencil on paper, the way she tilted her head as she studied him, the slight furrow between her brows when she concentrated. After an hour, she showed him the result. Julian stared at the drawing, stunned. She had captured him perfectly, but not as he saw himself. In her drawing, he looked thoughtful rather than cold, sad rather than cruel. She had seen past his defenses and drawn the man underneath. "Is this how you see me?" he asked quietly. Emma nodded. "Yes, this is the real you." Julian looked at her, this woman who had been in his house less than 2 weeks and somehow understood him better than people who had known him for years. Something shifted in his chest, like ice beginning to crack. He had been frozen for so long, locked in his grief, but Emma's presence was like the first warmth of spring, subtle but undeniable. "It's beautiful," he said. "You're very talented." Emma blushed at the praise. She had never heard words like that before. "I've always loved drawing," she admitted. "It was the one thing that was mine. My stepmother couldn't take it away because she didn't even know I did it." Julian wanted to say something harsh about her stepmother, but he held back. Instead, he asked, "What else do you enjoy? What else have you been denied?" Emma thought for a moment. "Music," she said. "We had a pianoforte once. When my father was alive, I used to play a little, but my stepmother sold it." She shook her head. "I haven't touched a piano in 12 years. "There's a music room on the east wing," Julian said immediately. "The pianoforte there hasn't been played since Catherine died. You're welcome to use it whenever you like." Emma's eyes widened. "Truly, truly." Julian stood. "Come, I'll show you now." He led her through the manor to a bright room with tall windows overlooking the garden. A beautiful pianoforte sat against one wall, dust covers removed. Julian opened the lid and gestured for Emma to sit. She approached the instrument like it was something sacred. Her fingers touched the keys gently, testing. Then she began to play. The music was hesitant at first, rusty from years of disuse. But gradually it grew stronger, more confident. She played a simple melody, something Emma remembered from childhood. The notes filled the room with warmth and life. Julian stood by the window, listening. He had not heard music in this room since Catherine's last days. She had been too weak to play herself, but she had liked to listen to him, attempt simple tunes to make her laugh. After she died, he had closed this room, unable to bear the memories. But now, hearing Emma play, he felt something different. Not the sharp pain of loss, but a gentler ache, a reminder that beautiful things still existed in the world, that life continued, even after devastating grief. When Emma finished, she looked up at him with shining eyes. "Thank you," she said. "I can't tell you what this means to me." "You don't have to," Julian said softly. "I can see it in your face." Their eyes met and held. The air between them felt charged, different. Emma's breath caught. Julian took a step toward her, then stopped himself. It was too soon. She had been here such a short time. Whatever was growing between them needed time to develop naturally. He would not rush it. He would not risk frightening her away. But the seed that had been planted was definitely beginning to grow. Over the next weeks, Emma and Julian fell into a deeper friendship. They spent hours in the library, reading aloud to each other. They walked the estate grounds every afternoon, regardless of weather. They took meals together, and the dining room that had once echoed with silence now filled with conversation and occasional laughter. The servants noticed the change. Mrs. Pemberton smiled to herself as she heard his lordship's voice carry from the drawing-room, animated in a way it hadn't been in years. The footmen exchanged glances when Lord Ashworth actually made a joke at breakfast. The maids whispered that Miss Emma was good for him, that she was bringing him back to life. Emma noticed the change too, but in herself, she smiled more easily. She held her head higher. The constant voice in her mind telling her she was worthless grew quieter, replaced by Julian's words of praise and encouragement. He complimented her drawings. He asked for her opinions on books and estate matters. He treated her like she had value, like her thoughts and feelings mattered. And somewhere along the way, Emma realized she was falling in love with him. It happened so gradually, she couldn't pinpoint the exact moment. Perhaps it was when he brought her tea, exactly how she liked it, remembering after she had mentioned it only once. Or when he stood in the rain beside her, holding an umbrella over her head while she sketched the garden. Or when he laughed at something she said, a real laugh that transformed his serious face into something boyish and bright. But she loved him. She loved his intelligence, his dry humor, his hidden kindness. She loved the way he listened when she spoke, like her words were important. She loved watching him soften day by day, like ice melting under spring sun. Emma knew she should guard her heart. Julian had been clear about their arrangement. Friendship, companionship, nothing more. He was still in love with his dead wife. Emma was just a convenience, a solution to his loneliness. She told herself not to hope for more. But hope, once planted, is hard to uproot. Julian was fighting his own battle. He had not expected to feel anything for Emma beyond mild appreciation for her company. But somewhere between their library afternoons and garden walks, between her quiet presence and her understanding silences, he had started to feel again. He noticed everything about her now. The way she bit her lip when she was concentrating, the soft sound of her humming while she drew, the way her face lit up when she discovered something interesting in a book, the graceful movement of her hands, the rare, precious sound of her laughter. He found himself thinking about her when they were apart, wondering what she was doing, wanting to share things with her, looking forward to dinner, not for the food, but for her company. He bought books he thought she would enjoy. He asked the gardener to cut fresh flowers for her room. He caught himself watching her, memorizing her features, storing up moments like a miser hoarding gold. And one evening, as they sat by the fire playing chess, Julian realized with sudden, terrifying clarity that he was falling in love with her. The realization shook him to his core. He had loved Catherine with his whole heart. When she died, he had sworn never to love again, because the pain of losing her was too great to ever risk feeling again. He had built walls around his heart, thick and high. He had become cold, cruel even, to keep the world at a distance. But Emma had slipped through his defenses without even trying. She had not demanded anything from him. She had not forced him to feel. She had simply been herself, kind and patient and real. And somehow, impossibly, his frozen heart had begun to thaw. Julian looked across the chessboard at Emma, who was frowning at the pieces with adorable concentration. His chest ached with emotion. He wanted to reach across the board and take her hand. He wanted to tell her everything he was feeling. He wanted to kiss her, to hold her, to promise her the world. But fear held him back. What if he told her and she didn't feel the same? What if she only saw him as her reluctant host, the man who had paid for her? What if opening his heart to her meant risking the same devastating loss he had suffered with Catherine? Could he survive that kind of pain again? "Your move," Emma said, looking up at him with those gentle eyes. Julian forced himself to focus on the board. "Right," he said, moving a piece at random. Emma immediately captured his knight with her queen. "Checkmate," she said softly. Julian blinked. He had lost. He had been so distracted by his thoughts that he hadn't seen the trap she was building. Emma's cheeks flushed pink. "I'm sorry," she said quickly. "I didn't mean to. You weren't paying attention." "No," Julian agreed. "I wasn't." He looked at her seriously. "My mind was elsewhere." "Is something troubling you?" Emma asked with concern. "You've seemed different today, distant." Julian wanted to laugh. Distant. If only she knew how close he wanted to be. "I'm fine," he lied. "Just tired." But Emma knew him too well now. She could read the shadows in his eyes, the tension in his shoulders. "Julian," she said gently, "you can talk to me, whatever it is." He looked at her for a long moment. "What if I told you I'm afraid?" he said quietly. "Of what?" "Of feeling too much." The words came out before he could stop them. "Of caring for someone and losing them again. Of opening my heart and having it destroyed." Emma's breath caught. She understood immediately what he was telling her, even if he couldn't say it directly. "Love is always a risk," she said softly. "But isn't it also worth it? Didn't your time with Lady Catherine, however brief, give you joy worth any price?" "Yes," Julian admitted. "But I don't know if I'm strong enough to pay that price twice." Emma set down the chess pieces carefully. "I think you're stronger than you know," she said. "You survived the worst loss. You're still here. You're still capable of kindness and laughter. That takes tremendous strength." She met his eyes. "And Julian, some things are worth the risk. Some people are worth the risk." They stared at each other across the chessboard. The fire crackled. The clock ticked. The rest of the world faded away. Julian saw everything he felt reflected in Emma's eyes. Hope, fear, longing. She cared for him too. He could see it clearly now. He stood abruptly. "I should retire," he said, his voice rough. "Good night, Emma." He left the room quickly, before he could do something reckless, before he could cross the space between them and pull her into his arms. He needed time to think, to understand what he was feeling, to decide if he was brave enough to risk his heart again. Emma sat alone by the fire, her own heart pounding. She had seen the look in Julian's eyes. She had heard the emotion in his voice. He felt something for her, but he was afraid. And she understood that fear, because she felt it too. She had spent years believing she was unworthy of love. Her stepmother's cruelty had convinced her that she was too plain, too poor, too nothing for anyone to want. The thought that Julian Ashworth, this intelligent, handsome, wealthy man, might actually care for her seemed impossible, like a dream she would wake from. But what if it wasn't a dream? What if this was real? What if two broken people had found each other and were slowly becoming whole together? Emma went to bed that night with her mind spinning and her heart full of fragile, terrifying hope. The next morning, Julian was distant again. He was polite but formal at breakfast. He excused himself to work on estate business and didn't emerge until dinner. Emma tried not to feel hurt, but his sudden withdrawal stung. Had she said too much last night? Had she frightened him away? Days passed in this new, painful pattern. Julian was kind but careful, keeping distance between them that hadn't been there before. Emma felt the loss keenly. She had grown used to his warmth, his attention, his friendship. Now she felt like she was back where she started, a stranger in a grand house, alone. Mrs. Pemberton noticed the change. "Have you and his lordship quarrelled?" she asked one afternoon while Emma sat in the morning room, attempting to draw but unable to focus. "No," Emma said quietly. "I think I frightened him." The housekeeper sat down beside her. "His lordship has been hurt deeply," she said. "When Lady Catherine died, I thought we would lose him too. Not to death, but to the darkness. He stopped caring about anything, stopped seeing anyone. He was like a ghost in this house." She patted Emma's hand. "You brought him back, dear. You reminded him how to live. That's a powerful thing, and it probably terrifies him." Emma's eyes filled with tears. "I didn't mean to. I just wanted to be his friend." "I know, dear. But sometimes friendship becomes something more, whether we plan it or not." Mrs. Pemberton smiled gently. "Be patient with him. He'll come around. He just needs time to accept what his heart is telling him." But Emma's patience was tested that very evening when a visitor arrived. A woman stepped out of an elegant carriage, dressed in the finest London fashion. She was beautiful, with perfect golden curls and a figure that made Emma feel shapeless in comparison. The woman swept into the house like she owned it, calling for Julian in a musical voice. Emma watched from the top of the stairs as Julian emerged from his study. "Lady Margot," he said with surprise. "I wasn't expecting you." "Darling Julian," Lady Margot said, removing her gloves. "I simply had to come check on you. It's been far too long since you've been to London. Society quite misses you." She looked around. "And I hear you have a guest." Julian's expression became guarded. "Yes, a companion. How intriguing." Lady Margot's sharp eyes spotted Emma on the stairs. "Is that her? The little mouse?" Emma's face burned. She wanted to disappear, but there was nowhere to go without walking past them. She descended the stairs with as much dignity as she could manage. Julian's jaw tightened as he watched her. "Emma," he said, "this is Lady Margot Fairfax. We've known each other since childhood. Margot, this is Miss Emma Grey, my guest." Lady Margot looked Emma up and down with barely concealed disdain. "How sweet," she said in a tone that meant the opposite. Julian always did have a kind heart, taking in strays. Emma's hands clenched in her skirts. She had faced her stepmother's cruelty for years. She would not be cowed by this woman. "Thank you for your concern, Lady Margot," she said calmly, "but I assure you I am quite well cared for here." Lady Margot's eyes narrowed. "I'm sure you are. Julian, we must talk privately. There are matters of importance to discuss." Julian looked torn. His eyes met Emma's, and she saw apology there. "Of course," he said. "Emma, will you excuse us?" Emma nodded and fled to her room, her heart pounding with humiliation and hurt. She had been dismissed, put in her place, reminded that she was nobody, a charity case, while Lady Margot was Julian's equal in breeding and social standing. She sat on her bed and pressed her hands to her face. What had she been thinking? That Julian could actually care for her romantically? That a lord would fall in love with a woman so far beneath him? Her stepmother had been right. She was a fool to hope for more than scraps. Downstairs, Julian led Lady Margot to the drawing room, his patience already wearing thin. Margot had been his friend once, before Catherine. She had wanted more than friendship, but Julian had never felt that way about her. After Catherine's death, Margot had tried again, visiting frequently, hinting at a match between them. Julian had politely declined every overture. "Why are you really here, Margot?" he asked once they were alone. "I told you I'm concerned about you." She sat gracefully on the sofa. "And the rumors I've been hearing are quite disturbing. You've taken in some woman of unknown origin. People are talking, Julian." "Let them talk," Julian said coldly. "My household is my own concern, but it reflects on your family name, on your standing in society." Margot leaned forward. "Darling, I know you're lonely. I understand, but there are proper ways to address that. You could remarry someone appropriate, someone who could help you reclaim your place in society." "Someone like you, you mean?" Julian said flatly. Margot smiled. "We would suit well, you and I. We're of the same world. We understand each other, and I would never make demands on your heart the way your first wife did. We could have a comfortable, practical arrangement." Julian felt disgust rise in his throat. "Get out," he said quietly. Margot blinked. "I beg your pardon? Get out of my house." Julian's voice was hard as stone. "You speak of Emma as if she's beneath you, when she has more genuine kindness in her little finger than you have in your entire body. You mock what I had with Catherine, calling it demanding, when it was the best thing that ever happened to me. And you suggest I marry for convenience, for society's approval, when I would rather die alone than live that lie." He stood. "You're not my friend, Margot. You never were. Leave my home and don't return." Lady Margot's face flushed with anger and humiliation. She stood stiffly. "You'll regret this," she said. "When society cuts you off completely, when you're left alone with your little nobody, you'll wish you had listened to me. If being cut off from people like you is the price of being true to myself, I'll pay it gladly." Julian said, "Goodbye, Margot." He called for her carriage and stood in the hall, arms crossed, until she left in a flurry of offended dignity. When the door closed behind her, Julian stood there for a moment, breathing hard. Then he took the stairs 2 at a time. He knocked on Emma's door. "Emma," he called, "please, I need to speak with you." Emma opened the door with red-rimmed eyes. Julian's heart clenched. "I'm sorry," he said immediately. "I'm sorry for how Margot spoke to you. I'm sorry for dismissing you. I'm sorry for being a coward this past week." Emma stared at him confused. "A coward?" Julian ran a hand through his hair. "Yes, a coward, because I've been falling in love with you, and it terrified me, so I pulled away instead of being honest." Emma's breath stopped. "What?" Julian stepped into her room and closed the door behind him. "Propriety be damned. I love you, Emma," he said, his voice intense. "I didn't want to. I fought it. I tried to convince myself it was just gratitude or companionship, but I can't lie to myself anymore. I love your kindness, your strength, your quiet intelligence. I love the way you see me, really see me, not the title or the grief, but the man underneath. I love your laugh and your drawings, and the way you bite your lip when you're thinking. I love you." Tears spilled down Emma's cheeks. "But you loved Catherine," she whispered. "You said yourself you could never risk that pain again." "I did love Catherine," Julian agreed. "I will always love her memory, but she's gone, and I'm still here, still alive, still capable of feeling. And Emma, you've made me want to live again. Not just exist, but truly live." He took her hands in his. "I can't promise I won't be afraid sometimes. I can't promise this will be easy. But I can promise that I love you with everything I have. And if you'll have me, if you feel even a fraction of what I feel, I will spend the rest of my life proving to you that you were worth the risk." Emma was crying in earnest now. "I love you too," she said. "I've loved you for weeks, but I thought I was just a convenience to you, a way to fill your empty house." "No," Julian said fiercely. He pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her. "You're not a convenience. You're not a replacement. You're Emma, and you're everything I never knew I needed." He pulled back to look at her face, cupping her cheeks gently. "You're beautiful and talented, and so much stronger than you know. Your stepmother was wrong. Everyone who made you feel worthless was wrong. You are extraordinary." Emma laughed through her tears. "I'm very ordinary," she protested. "Then I love ordinary," Julian said. He leaned down slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, when she lifted her face toward his, he kissed her. The kiss was soft, tentative, full of question and promise. Emma's hands came up to rest on his chest. Julian's arms tightened around her. The kiss deepened, and Emma felt like she was falling and flying at the same time. This was what she had dreamed of. This was what love felt like, safe and thrilling and absolutely right. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. Julian rested his forehead against hers. "Marry me," he said. "Not because of some arrangement or obligation. Marry me because I love you, and I want to spend my life with you." "Yes," Emma whispered. "Yes, I'll marry you." Julian smiled, really smiled, and Emma's heart soared. He kissed her again, softer this time, a promise sealed. They should have had a perfect happily ever after from that moment. But life, as Emma had learned, was rarely so simple. The next morning brought a letter that changed everything. Julian read the letter at breakfast, his expression darkening. "Your stepmother," he said grimly, "has filed a complaint with the local magistrate. She claims I abducted you, that the payment was for your services as a companion only, and that I've ruined your reputation. She's demanding either your return or a much larger payment." Emma's blood ran cold. "She wants more money," she said. "She's always wanted more money." "She won't get it," Julian said, crumpling the letter. "And she certainly won't get you back. But this could cause problems. If she makes enough noise, if she involves enough people, there could be an investigation. Scandal." "I don't care about scandal," Emma said. "But I care what it does to you," Julian replied. He took her hand. "I won't let her hurt you again. I'll handle this." But the situation escalated quickly. Emma's stepmother, sensing opportunity, had gone to a London gossip sheet with her story. Within days, lurid tales were circulating about the Earl of Ashworth, who had purchased a young woman for unsavoury purposes. Some stories painted Julian as a villain, others painted Emma as a fortune hunter. The truth didn't matter. The scandal was delicious, and society devoured it. Letters arrived from Julian's family. Horrified by the gossip, friends from London wrote concerned notes. Even some of Julian's tenants began to look at him differently. The pressure mounted. "We should marry immediately," Julian said one evening. They sat in the library, the latest gossip sheet burning in the fire. "Once you're my wife, legitimately, this all becomes meaningless." Emma shook her head. "If we marry now, it looks like we're admitting guilt, like you did ruin me, and now you're making amends." She looked at him with tears in her eyes. "Julian, I won't be the scandal that destroys your reputation. I won't be the reason society shuns you." "I don't care about society," Julian said fiercely. "But I do," Emma said, "because it will hurt you, eventually. You have responsibilities, an estate, tenants who depend on you. You need society's goodwill for business, for influence, for everything that keeps this world running." She stood, wrapping her arms around herself. "Maybe I should leave, go somewhere far away, let the scandal die down." "No," Julian said, standing too. "Absolutely not. I'm not losing you." "You might lose everything else," Emma said, her voice breaking, "and I can't let that happen." They argued late into the night. Julian refused to consider sending her away. Emma refused to marry him under a cloud of scandal. They went to bed, angry and hurt, both feeling helpless against forces beyond their control. The next morning, Emma woke to find Julian gone. Mrs. Pemberton brought a note with breakfast. "His lordship left early for London," she said. "He didn't say when he'd return." Emma's hands shook as she read the note. "Emma, I'm going to fix this. Trust me, I'll be back soon. Wait for me. J." Days passed with no word. Emma tried to occupy herself with drawing and reading, but worry gnawed at her constantly. What was Julian doing? Was he in trouble? Had he decided she wasn't worth the fight after all? On the 5th day, Lady Margot returned. She swept into the morning room where Emma sat with her sketchbook. "Still here, I see," Margot said with false sweetness. "How tenacious of you. What do you want?" Emma asked wearily. "To give you some advice." Margot sat down uninvited. "Julian has gone to London to face down the scandal. He's meeting with his family, his solicitors, and various influential people. He's trying to salvage his reputation while keeping you." She laughed. "It's quite touching, really, but doomed to fail. Society will never accept you as his wife. You have no family, no connections, no dowry. You're nobody." Emma's jaw tightened. "If you've come to gloat, you're wasting your time." "I've come to offer you money," Margot said. "A substantial amount, enough to start a new life somewhere far from here. All you have to do is leave, disappear. Let Julian realize he's better off without you." Emma stood. "Get out," she said quietly. "Be reasonable," Margot pressed. "You love him, don't you? Then save him from this disaster. Let him go." "I said get out," Emma repeated, louder now. "Julian makes his own choices, and I'm not leaving unless he asks me to." Margot's expression hardened. "You're a fool. You'll ruin him, and he'll hate you for it eventually. That's his decision to make, not yours." Emma walked to the door and opened it. "Goodbye, Lady Margot." After Margot left, Emma sat down and cried. Not because she believed Margot's poison, but because she was so tired. Tired of fighting. Tired of feeling like she wasn't good enough. Tired of waiting and worrying. That evening, Julian returned. Emma heard the commotion in the entrance hall and rushed downstairs. He looked exhausted, his clothes rumpled from travel, shadows under his eyes. But when he saw her, his face lit up. "Emma," he said, opening his arms. She ran to him, and he held her tight. "I'm sorry I left without explanation. I'm sorry I worried you." "What did you do?" Emma asked against his chest. Julian pulled back to look at her. "I fought for us," he said simply. "I met with every person who matters. I told them the truth. I told them that I love you, that I intend to marry you, and that anyone who has a problem with that can rot in hell." He smiled tiredly. "I may have been slightly more diplomatic than that, but not much." "And?" Emma asked, hardly daring to hope. "And my family has agreed to support us. My solicitor has dealt with your stepmother, paying her off with the stipulation that she never contacts either of us again. And I spoke to the Archbishop of Canterbury himself." Julian took Emma's hands. "I want to marry you properly, with all the ceremony and respect you deserve. I want the whole world to know that you're not my shame or my secret. You're my beloved, and I'm proud to call you my wife." Emma's eyes filled with tears again. "Julian, there will still be gossip," he warned. "Some people will always disapprove, but the people who matter, the people whose opinion actually counts, they'll accept you, because I'm demanding they do. And because once they meet you, they'll understand why I love you." Emma threw her arms around his neck. "I don't need the world's approval," she said. "I just need yours." "You have it," Julian said. "You have my approval, my respect, my admiration, and my love. Always." He kissed her deeply right there in the entrance hall, in front of the servants and anyone who cared to watch. "Now, let's plan a wedding." They married 3 weeks later in the village church. Julian's family attended, somewhat stiffly, but present. Many of his friends came from London. The villagers filled the pews, curious and supportive. Emma wore a new dress, made specially for her, in the softest ivory silk. She carried roses from the manor garden. As she walked down the aisle toward Julian, Emma felt like she was dreaming. This man, this wonderful man, loved her, chose her, fought for her. He stood at the altar, watching her approach, and the look on his face told her everything she needed to know. He loved her completely, without reservation, without shame. They spoke their vows in clear voices. When the vicar pronounced them husband and wife, Julian kissed her with such tenderness that Emma heard several women in the congregation sigh. Walking back down the aisle as his wife, Emma felt like a different person than the frightened woman who had arrived at his door in winter. She was Lady Ashworth now, but more than that, she was loved. She was chosen. She was home. The wedding breakfast at the manor was beautiful. Julian never left her side, his hand always finding hers. He introduced her to everyone with pride in his voice. "My wife," he would say, and Emma's heart swelled every time. That night, in Julian's bedroom, in the bed where she had once feared she would be used as an object, Emma finally understood what it meant to be loved. Julian was gentle, patient, worshipful. He kissed every part of her, whispering how beautiful she was, how much he loved her, how lucky he was. And Emma, who had spent years believing she was worthless, finally allowed herself to believe she was precious. In the quiet aftermath, lying in Julian's arms, Emma whispered, "I love you." "I love you too," Julian replied, kissing her forehead. "Thank you for being brave enough to wait for me. Thank you for believing I was worth the risk." "We were both worth it," Emma said softly. Julian smiled in the darkness. She was right. They had both taken the risk, both been brave, and together they had found something neither had thought possible after so much loss and pain. They had found love again. They had found home. Months later, as spring turned the gardens green and coaxed roses from their winter sleep, Emma stood in the music room playing the pianoforte, while Julian read nearby. Sunlight streamed through the windows. The air smelled of flowers. Emma's drawings hung on the walls, small treasures Julian insisted on displaying. She finished her song and turned to find Julian watching her with that soft expression she loved. "What are you thinking?" she asked. "That I'm happy," he said simply. "For the first time in years, I'm genuinely, completely happy." Emma crossed the room and sat beside him. "Me too," she said. Julian took her hand and placed it on his chest, over his heart. "When you arrived here, I thought I was giving you shelter," he said. "But you gave me so much more. You gave me back my life, my joy, my ability to feel." He kissed her hand gently. "You warmed much more than my bed, Emma. You warmed my entire existence." Emma laughed softly, remembering that first terrible night when he had commanded her presence in his room. How far they had come from that dark beginning. "And you gave me everything I never knew I could have," she said. "Love, respect, a place where I belong. You saw worth in me when I couldn't see it myself." "It was always there," Julian said. "I just helped you recognize it." They sat together in comfortable silence, two people who had been broken and alone, now whole and together. Outside, birds sang in the garden. Inside, the house that had been so empty now felt full of warmth and life. The cruel lord had become the devoted husband. The unwanted girl had become the beloved wife. And every morning, when dawn broke over Ashworth Manor, they woke together, grateful for the unexpected gift of second chances and new beginnings. Their love story, born from cold commands and harsh circumstances, had bloomed into something beautiful and enduring, and they would spend the rest of their days proving that love, real love, could conquer even the cruelest beginnings and create the most joyful endings.